The highly anticipated Obi-Wan Kenobi show has finally been released. Was it worth the wait? Or will we find its lack of competence disturbing? We're gonna find out. Let's get this binge watch started. The episode opens with an Order 66 sequence, and it was decent. I do wish that the scene got more violent and that we possibly even saw Anakin in his Jedi robe killing Jedi and maybe even coming after the younglings, but it just sort of ends. We then get taken to Tatooine, and we get the introduction of the Inquisitors who are hunting any remaining Jedi, which was pretty cool. I really like the conversation between Obi-Wan and Uncle Owen. It shows the dynamic between the two, and that Uncle Owen was never on the side of Obi-Wan and his expectations for Luke. I especially like how he throws it in his face that he already failed one Skywalker, and he is not going to allow him to fail another. That was harsh, and Obi-Wan really felt that. Now, the CGI and fake backgrounds looked a lot more real in The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett, and that confused me, because in this show, there was a point where the green screen looked not fake like an MCU movie, but dated. Like it would have looked super real years ago, but it doesn't quite look real now. And whilst watching, I thought to myself, the backgrounds don't look real like the latest Star Wars shows. It looks more like the CGI in the prequels. And then it hit me. The show is deliberately making the CGI look dated so it looks more like the prequels. And I really appreciated that detail, and it went a long way into chronologically placing this movie with the prequel era. I like the Inquisitors as well. They look just like they did in Star Wars Rebels, a show that I still haven't finished watching yet, mind you, and they are built up very well for new viewers who haven't seen them before. But for the rest of us who do know about them, I can't wait to see them get more involved as the show goes on. That is, except for this new Inquisitor. These characters feel very much like Star Wars characters, but there is something about her acting and the look that they gave her where she feels less like a Star Wars character and more like a character from a CW show. But I guess we'll have to see how she does in the upcoming episodes. Overall, I like the atmosphere of the episode, and anytime it focused on Obi-Wan, that's when I was the most interested. The surprising part of the show is when it focused on young Leia, and for a show called Obi-Wan, I was surprised that they focused so much time on her. It almost felt like this was the Obi-Wan and Leia show. But then she gets kidnapped and it all made sense. At first Obi-Wan is reluctant, but after Bail Organa pleads with him to go, I realized this is how Leia knows Obi-Wan in episode 4 when she says,
"Years ago you served my father in the Clone Wars. I regret that I am unable to present my father's request to you in person. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope."
So this little storyline that they incorporated into the show is an ingenious way of showing how Leia knows Obi-Wan. That said, I do have some problems. The child acting across the board with this show seems very off. The little actress that is playing Leia in particular, now she's not terrible, she has a lot of scenes where she does do a great job, but there are a lot of times when it feels like she doesn't seem to be acting in the scenes, or you can tell that she is trying too hard. Now, she's a kid, and I'm sure she's doing her best, but that is what I noticed. And as someone who does wish to watch a show about Obi-Wan Kenobi multiple times, I think they spent way too much time with young Leia scenes, and now that I've seen them once, I don't need to see them again. But yeah, she's kidnapped in a rather unconvincing chase scene, and Obi-Wan has to temporarily stop watching over Luke and find her. So this was a decent first episode. Not great, but decent. And it gets a 7 out of 10. So, let's see what happens in episode 2. Obi-Wan goes on his mission, and I like the look of this city that he comes to. When I saw this, I could have sworn that I saw this city in both the Clone Wars and the Bad Batch, and it was so cool to see in live action. I even like how Obi-Wan sees a clone trooper who is homeless and asking for change. That is a very sad visual to see, especially if you know the story of how the clones were used and abused in the Clone Wars. It is a shame though that his Order 66 programming didn't come into play at some point in this episode. And I did not expect this guy to be in an Obi-Wan show. My younger brother couldn't stop laughing when he saw my reaction. This guy is not a bad actor, but he's not really a good one in my eyes either. Everything he does is always played for laughs, and that's exactly how he was used here as well. And although he had one serious moment later on, he went straight back to the comedy. And yeah, I didn't like him in here, and of all the Star Wars shows, he should not have been in this one. I also had an issue with the action in this episode. Wasn't there 2 bounty hunters firing at Obi-Wan here? He takes one of them out, but then the other one stops shooting, and then he catches Leia with the Force and then just suddenly appears at the bottom. And that threw me off, because there were 2 guys coming after him and Obi-Wan only ended up fighting 1. That was bad direction, and I really did not like that. And also, I didn't like the 5th sister or whatever she is, but I was willing to see her get better. But then she did this. She killed the Inquisitor, and I really don't care about her character anymore. I just don't like her. This is the step too far. I really don't understand why they would kill such a well-established and beloved character like he was nothing. And he got taken out like a bitch. His death really was pathetic. That's why people are not going to like this character. It's not because she is being played by a black woman that people will undoubtedly go to. If that really was the case, then people would not have accepted Rosaria Dawson as Ahsoka. Ahsoka is one of the most beloved characters in all of Star Wars, and if Star Wars fans accepted her as their most beloved character, then that definitely kills the argument that Star Wars fans are racist. If anyone is sending her racist messages, then that's bad, and I do not agree with anyone who does that. But not all the people that don't approve of her are like that. I have no doubt that these are just Kathleen Kennedy's workers who are posting these tweets and are throwing those with genuine criticisms in the same group as the racists. Even though Kathleen Kennedy gave her black characters nothing to do in the sequel trilogy and even removed her black actors from the posters for the China release. And yet, they think that they are in a position to be calling people out as racists. Give me a break. And I gotta reiterate, I was open to seeing her character improve, but once she did that, I didn't care anymore. I just didn't like her. It could have been a white person playing the role. I still would not have liked the character after they killed off this well-known character like he was a bitch. This episode is decent, but I really don't like the way the episode ended. I am seeing signs of Kathleen Kennedy here, and I am not happy. This episode gets a flat 7 out of 10. Well, that was quicker than expected. Darth Vader shows up in this episode, and it was very underwhelming. Everything about the episode was underwhelming. I like the first half of the episode where Obi-Wan and Leia are continuing their journey and almost get caught, and I like how this stormtrooper gets cut in half by the laser gates, and I even like how Obi-Wan tells Leia a bit about his childhood and what he remembers of his family. But the last half of this episode just felt so flat and felt like nothing. The directing was very lackluster, the stuff with Obi-Wan and Darth Vader just didn't have the level of tension or importance that it needed. The scene started, and then Obi-Wan runs away, over and over again, and you can't help but wonder why they keep separating and then finding each other again. It just completely kills the tension. Even the scene where Darth Vader chokes a bunch of people to draw Obi-Wan out, even that felt underwhelming and didn't have the impact on the darkness that it needed. Everything that happened in this episode just felt underwhelming, and I think that is down to the directing. If the team behind the Clone Wars were directing and writing this, they would have made it scary and intense and super dark and shocking. But it felt so blah and underwhelming here. Darth Vader didn't come off evil enough. When the villains did villainous stuff in the Clone Wars, they were freaking evil. And this is Darth freaking Vader. He is as evil as it gets. And everything he did felt like it wasn't savage and brutal enough. They needed to bring the Clone Wars level of violence and grit here, and they didn't do that, which is a real detriment in my opinion. I mean, this is Darth Vader. He is supposed to be the baddest of the bad, and yet I'm looking at the lesser bad guys in the Clone Wars and I found them way more intimidating.
Man of my word, here is your granddaughter, as promised. Kill them! Kill them all!
What are you doing?
Never let the weak tell you what to do. Welcome to Death Watch.
This all could have been great, but it just ended up being okay. I liked the idea that Obi-Wan and Darth Vader never met each other until episode 4, but having them meet again here just takes away from that meeting in episode 4 A New Hope. Even the music in this episode was so underwhelming and just soulless.
You should have killed me when you had the chance.
It sounded like the music was bored during these big scenes, and when you take into account how epic and amazing John Williams' score for these two was in Revenge of the Sith, I would expect much better from the score here, because it felt like they weren't even trying. Oh, and the lightsaber battle that these two have, it is amongst the worst of the 6 Star Wars movies to me. It's a bit better than the lightsaber fight in episode 4, but that's about all the credit I will give it, which actually isn't much credit at all when you think about it. I thought this episode was decent at best. It just didn't have the punch that it needed, and all round, it really was lacking to me. Each event should feel meaningful. This event did not feel meaningful. It just felt like a checklist that they needed to tick, and they ticked it off, that's for sure. Even Darth Vader's entrance felt lackluster. His footsteps should sound like stomps, but they sound like normal, weightless footsteps, and he lacks the weight of being this unstoppable force. We needed some kind of entrance like what Matt Reeves did with Batman. We needed an equally good entrance and build-up for Darth Vader. Even the dialogue between the two felt very first draft and didn't didn't have the weight behind it that it should have had. And why didn't Darth Vader catch her when she was shooting? He should have used the Force and bring her down and kill her, but instead he just stands around watching. He doesn't even try to do anything about it. Seriously, the directing really let this episode down. This is supposed to be the biggest reunion in all of Star Wars, and I didn't feel anything. I felt so much more when Ahsoka met Darth Vader again. That was so sad and emotional and beautifully done by Dave Filoni, but here, it just felt heartless. Now, I did like the interactions between Obi-Wan and Leia more in this episode. Even the scene where he says he sees her mother when he looks at her, that was a very nice moment. The Grand Inquisitor is said to be dead, and I really hate that. Even if he is still alive later, I don't know why they decided to have him get stabbed in the first place. And as for the new Inquisitor, it feels like she has her own separate show going on here. I feel like she could have ended up having her own arc in a different Star Wars show, but they ended up shoving her into the Obi-Wan show for some reason. Also, that room Vader was in looked so cheap, like it was something from a fan film. So yeah, not the worst episode of the season, but it got a lot of big stuff wrong, and that's why it gets a very mediocre 5 out of 10. I wish Dave Filoni was in charge of this show. He made the relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan so unbelievably good, and he would have made this show so much better. But instead, we have different showrunners, and I don't even see Dave Filoni's name attached to this show. And his exclusion really was one of the worst things this show could have done. It is now 3 weeks later and I just watched episode 4. That is not a good sign when I couldn't be bothered to watch 2 episodes of an Obi-Wan show. But yeah, I'm going to be watching the rest of the season in one sitting now that they're all out. So this episode opens with Obi-Wan being put into a tank so he can heal from his burns given to him by Vader.
You're still not healed! Your burns, your body, they just need time.
Where's Leia?
Wow. Obi-Wan doesn't seem to act like someone who just got severely burned, does he? He gets out of the tank almost immediately and he doesn't bring up his injuries again. He doesn't even act like he has any injuries. And this whole episode is essentially a rescue mission to rescue Leia. And as far as rescue mission episodes go, I actually found this pretty fun. I even enjoyed the part where Obi-Wan uses the Force to hold all of this water. That was awesome. And I had some fun with the other action scenes as well. There was also a scene where the characters had to improvise and that was also fun too. I gotta say though, this is the final nail in the coffin for how useless of a character Reeva is. She can't even scare a 10-year-old into talking. We all know that Leia becomes this confident character later, but when she's 10 years old, come on. There is nothing wrong with having her get scared, but this feels like the fake female empowerment thing again, where they're trying to make her a strong female character to the point that she has no weaknesses. And I thought they wouldn't be doing that anymore. I wonder who is behind that. And it's almost humorous how this show thinks that it's being intimidating with Reeva, even though she can't even scare a 10-year-old. So yeah, Obi-Wan saves Leia and Vader gets mad at Reeva. And he doesn't kill her, unfortunately, because it turns out that she put a tracker on Leia and they're going to find him in the next episode. So yeah, as I said earlier, as far as rescue mission episodes go, this was a good one. The little actress that plays Leia even did a better job with her acting. Acting all weak and vulnerable and then dropping her face and not giving information away was great from an acting point of view, even though I think she really should have shown more fear here. But even taking that complaint out of it, I feel like more should have happened in this episode, and Obi-Wan should definitely have felt the pain, the weight, and the guilt of having just met Anakin again, as well as the pain of his injuries. But they throw those plot lines away like it was nothing. This episode should have had a lot more going for it than just a rescue mission. Episode 4 gets a 6 out of 10, and now we have only 2 episodes left. Here's hoping they get better, but as of right now, I feel like this show has made terrible use of its time, and I seriously doubt that the final 2 episodes will make up for it. But we'll see. This episode opens with a very cool scene that is intercut throughout the episode of Obi-Wan training Anakin, and it was great to see Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen on screen again, and I like how the lessons that Obi-Wan teaches Anakin comes back to benefit Vader and hurt him as well. Everything related to that in this episode was great. I even liked how Obi-Wan calms everyone down when they find out the Empire is on their way and gives them a battle strategy. The reason I really liked this is because he is using his skills and thinking from the Clone Wars, and having him take the initiative was very good to see here. Also, it turns out that this whole time, Reeva was a youngling, and that's why she was so mad at Obi-Wan, because he wasn't there when Anakin came in and killed all of them during Order 66. And this whole time she was trying to work her way to the top so she could kill Darth Vader. Although I don't don't know how she could play dead when he stabbed her in the chest with a lightsaber. I mean, that's bad enough for an adult, but worse for a kid. She shouldn't be playing dead at that point. She should be dead, especially when all it takes to kill someone with a lightsaber is scratching them with it. Now, when I first heard this idea of her being a youngling, I actually really liked the idea. The more I thought about it, however, the more the idea started to unravel and fall apart. Especially when we find out that Vader always knew that Reeva was a youngling, and the more I thought about that also really became a problem. No one knows that Darth Vader is Anakin Skywalker. The only people that did know that I am aware of is Tarkin and the Emperor. Anyone else who knows, Vader will immediately kill them. This is what has been established in the movies and the shows, and it has also been showcased in stuff like the comics, and for him to keep Reeva alive for all of these years is very out of character for him, because as long as she is alive, the risk of getting his identity out is alive, so he would instantly kill her to prevent that potential outcome from happening. So for him to keep her alive was just wrong and out of character. And how did she know that Anakin was Darth Vader? The clone troopers never called him Lord Vader in the flashbacks, and again, how could she survive a lightsaber to the chest? So Vader and Reeva have a battle and he wipes the floor with her, and this battle was really kinda cool, and I did want to see Vader just finish her off here, because not only have I had enough of her, but also so we could just end her part of the story, especially before any more plot holes show up. And even if you take that out of it, there is no place for a story to go now. Her role is over. So she's dead here, although I don't know why they didn't just show her die. Oh, and the Grand High Inquisitor was still alive. I think I heard his species have 2 stomachs or something, so yeah, I don't know if that's true or not. But because she stabbed him in episode 2, he didn't get to do anything throughout this whole show. How pathetic. We all know whose choice that was. It has her fingerprints all over it. This wouldn't be the first time she sidelined a character that Dave Filoni created. So this episode gets an unenthusiastic 7 out of 10. The stuff with Obi-Wan, Anakin and Darth Vader was the best stuff to come out of this episode. That I would give a high 8 or low 9 out of 10. But everything else was just consistent with the rest of the show. Average. Anyway, we have come to the final episode, and this should just be about Obi-Wan and Darth Vader and nothing else. So, let's see what happens in the final episode. How does she survive 2 stabs to the chest with a lightsaber from Darth Vader? And not only that, but how did she get to Tatooine so damn fast with that stab? I mean, it took everyone else just 1 stab to the chest and they were dead. Maybe her being a woman and also a character of color saved her. Reeva really does have Kathleen Kennedy written all over her. Honestly, this is stupid. It was stupid the first time and it's even dumber now. She should have died here, but it's clear that they are setting her up for a spin-off show. And it did that at the expense of making Darth Vader less threatening, less terrifying, and less competent. How stupid of you, Kathleen Kennedy. But of course, if your name is found on anything, we should expect the worst. In the end, we also had the Grand Inquisitor in here and he didn't do anything. What a frickin' disgrace. Also, how did Reeva find out that Luke is Darth Vader's son from this completely broken message?
He's found you. If he's learned of the children, I'll head to Tatooine. Owen, help the boy.
That really confused me. Reeva's whole role in this episode just felt like a distraction and was complete and utter nonsense. She should have died in the last episode after Vader stabbed her, but to be alive through all this and to still be alive by the end of the episode, that is just ridiculous. I have seen characters survive injuries before, but this takes it to a whole nother level. Also, the movie tries to give her a redemption arc, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized what scum she is. If she wanted to get revenge on Darth Vader, then why did she kill this guy and cut the hand off of this woman? And why was she being a right ruthless bitch when it came to hunting down one of her own? What part did they play in not stopping Anakin during Order 66? They were as helpless as you, so I don't care what her reason is, she was a bad youngling from the start as far as I'm concerned. She was always going to turn to the dark side, and for them to very half-assedly say that she's good now, even though she had no problem torturing a kid only a few hours ago, I don't buy it. And also, I don't like that Reeva now knows the secret about Luke. The only people who know that was Organa, Yoda, and Obi-Wan, and now Reeva is in that circle. That doesn't feel right to me, and I don't like that someone else is out there who knows the secret of Luke Skywalker. It makes the New Hope feel less special when more people start to find out who he is. I mean, Darth Maul was killed once he put it together, so I don't see why she should still live after figuring it out. So Reeva, she is still the worst thing about this show, and she should have either died in the last episode, or better yet, not have been in this show to begin with. Now, on to the good stuff about this episode, and there was a lot. First of all, the dialogue between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader was actually good here, as opposed to their poorly written dialogue in episode 3. And the fight choreography was better here too, and the way both of them were using the Force on each other was so great, especially when Obi-Wan started to use the Force on Darth Vader. That was such a great moment. We have never seen Vader look this defeated before, aside from when Luke fought him in episode 6. And I love how Obi-Wan cuts off the side of his mask where you can see a portion of his face, and you can also hear both Anakin's voice and Vader's voice at the same time. This is something that was taken right out of Star Wars Rebels and was something that Dave Filoni pioneered, and they brought it into live action, which was so cool. I do like the idea that Obi-Wan and Ahsoka were the only ones that were able to beat Darth Vader and see part of Anakin, although Ahsoka not killing him made sense as the whole place was collapsing and she did not want to leave him again. Obi-Wan not killing Vader, however, makes no sense. The only reason he didn't is because Vader is alive in the future films, and they had to maintain that continuity, and that is just bad writing. And I gotta say, although I liked their reunion here, I thought Darth Vader's reunion with Ahsoka was way better. The absolute shock and heartbreak of Ahsoka seeing Anakin again, and when she says she is not going to leave him again, and their theme plays from when she left him in the Clone Wars, this was such a sad reunion to see. And Dave Filoni actually said that he was originally going to let Ahsoka die here, which made this all the more tragic. But here, it feels like something is missing. I do like the little connections it makes though.
Anakin's gone. You didn't kill Anakin Skywalker. I did.
How did my father die?
A young Jedi named Darth Vader, who was a pupil of mine until he turned to evil. He betrayed and murdered your father.
Goodbye, Darth.
Only a master of evil, Darth.
That added some value to the later movies, but it did not make up for the rest of the stuff that went on in this episode. So yeah, again, everything with Obi-Wan and Anakin and Vader was great, but everything else was again average and then downright crap. So that evens the score out, and this episode gets a 7 out of 10. And for those wondering, I liked the very brief ending with Qui-Gon. It was a very nice bookend for the season, and if they left it here, you can imagine that Obi-Wan continues his training that Yoda had for him at the end of episode 3. Also, the reason I am very hard on this show is because I have seen Star Wars The Clone Wars, and that show tells you a lot about Obi-Wan's character and shows how much he's been through, including a relationship that he had, but unlike Anakin, he did not go through with, and he's had to deal with her death as well. The Clone Wars did so much for every single character, and I expected that level of high quality writing for this show, and instead, the series felt like it was not about Obi-Wan that much. We hardly get to see him deal with any of his trauma. The show instead kept pulling the focus onto other characters that I genuinely couldn't care less about. This show should have been so much more, and it ended up just being above average, and that's why my overall score for Obi-Wan Kenobi is a low 6 out of 10. I feel like the more I reflect and think about it, it might go down to a 5. I will say that the directing definitely got better in the last 2 episodes, but even so, the Obi-Wan and Darth Vader stuff was about the only stuff that I liked in this show, which is not surprising as that is what we wanted from this series to begin with. More or less everything else they focus on was just a bunch of bloat that feels like it could have been put in any other Star Wars show, and that is a detriment because this is one of the only Star Wars stories that could have been far more unique, but it ended up feeling very similar to the other live-action Star Wars shows we have had. This show could have done so much more with its 6 episodes, and it needed to be cut down and be a more intimate and tragic story between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader. This is the kind of storytelling opportunity that someone would kill to get. This should be such a tight and emotional limited series that should send tears streaming down our eyes, but instead, it felt like Disney treated this like any other show. This was supposed to be special, a full-on emotional character study, but it just ended up being another generic Disney Plus show, which, I gotta say, I really am not impressed with the quality of content on Disney Plus lately. When other streaming streaming services have their own flagship shows like Stranger Things and The Boys, etc., these shows on Disney Plus pale in comparison to the quality of those shows. This is a freaking Obi-Wan show, and this is the best you could do. Why am I even subscribed to Disney Plus if this is what I can expect from their content? Now, some people are gonna say, Eric, you should just enjoy it for what it is, not what you want it to be. And that argument works in some cases, but it does not work here, because it was clear cut what this story should have been from the very start. It should have been a character study, a descent into depression for Obi-Wan. They say that war veterans have nasty after effects when they come back from war, and that is exactly what Obi-Wan should have had. Except, not only did he lose the war and all of his friends and soldiers with the exception of 2 people, but he also had to fight and in his mind, kill his best friend, his brother, which, if you watch the Clone Wars, which is canon and was created by George Lucas, you will see how close Obi-Wan and Anakin's friendship was. So this show should be heartbreaking. It should be Logan with Obi-Wan. When Logan talks about the mutants being gone and how they lost, that is how Obi-Wan should feel about the Jedi. This show should have been a deep character study like Logan, which is exactly what the showrunner said it was going to be, and no one believed her. I actually thought that people were being a bit overly harsh and dismissive, but it turns out that they were a lot smarter than I was, and they saw through her statement. This should have been an extension of the Clone Wars. They should have hired everyone that worked on the Clone Wars and got them to write this show, because they know how to write for both Anakin and Obi-Wan. They made their friendship in the Clone Wars exactly what it should have been in the movies, but instead, they brought on completely different people, and you can really tell.
There are no new mutants, understand? There hasn't been a new one born in 25 years. Not anywhere. I've always thought we were part of God's plan. Maybe we were God's mistake.
That's the kind of guilt that should be riddling Obi-Wan, that the Jedi are all gone now, and maybe the Jedi were a mistake. But you can't get that kind of character development because it keeps cutting back to Reeva. Logan focused on 3 characters for the whole movie, and then we had a bunch of side characters that would come and go when needed. That's what we needed with this show, not Reeva and her nonsensical arc. She wants to get revenge on Vader for killing innocents, and her way of going about that is by killing more innocents. This character really was a cancer, and is one of the many things that really brought this show down. And by the way, who is Reeva to tell Obi-Wan that Anakin is still alive? The way that information was delivered to Obi-Wan could have been handled so much better. He should have been able to figure it out on his own during his first encounter with Vader. Vader could be like, Obi-Wan, we meet again at last. And Obi-Wan would be like, what? Forgive me, but I don't think we have been introduced. That would have been a far better way of having him slowly realize that, wait a minute, this person is talking, it can't be, can it? This is Anakin. That would have been far superior. But no, Kathleen Kennedy said it has to happen this way. Reeva doesn't make sense within the Star Wars world, and she doesn't even make sense in this story. Everything with Obi-Wan and Darth Vader was the best stuff the show had to offer. Most everything else was just bloat. Really, if the Clone Wars writers' room and directors helmed this show, it would have been amazing. As is, it was just okay. And that is not what I expected from an Obi-Wan Kenobi show based after Star Wars Episode 3. No wonder Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau looked uncomfortable during Star Wars Celebration. They knew this was coming and that people would not be happy with it. You know, it's bad when an Obi-Wan show doesn't compare or even come close to how dark, mature, violent, and well-written the animated Clone Wars show is. And even though I really enjoyed the final battle with Obi-Wan and Vader, this show overall was disappointing to me, and I expected far better.